When Chief Jess Carter, the first black woman to lead a police department, is pulled over by two officers who don't recognize her, she's faced with a choice: reveal her identity or teach them a lesson in authority. Subscribe to our channel and listen to the full story. It will leave you stunned and make you question the boundaries of power and respect in a world built on assumptions. Jess Carter's black SUV hummed along the quiet suburban streets, the early morning light casting a soft glow on the city's horizon. The world was still, as if holding its breath, and Jess was alone with her thoughts. She had just been appointed as the chief of police, the first black woman to hold the position in this city. It was a monumental achievement, but also an immense challenge. Jess had worked tirelessly to rise through the ranks, always proving herself in a system that was not designed for someone like her. Today, she would begin the daunting task of bridging the gap between the police and the communities they served. She turned off the main road toward the city, her mind focused on the work ahead. But before she could get too lost in her thoughts, a flash of blue lights behind her caught her attention. Jess glanced at the rearview mirror. Two officers were pulling her over. Jess signaled and pulled her SUV to the side of the road, the tires crunching softly on the gravel. Officer Mark Reynolds, an older officer, approached her window with a mix of suspicion and condescension. "Can I ask why you're driving this car?" Reynolds asked, eyeing her vehicle suspiciously. "You don't look like you're from around here. Is it yours?" Jess remained calm, handing him her driver's license. "Yes, it's mine," she replied. "Is there a problem?" Reynolds didn't respond immediately, his gaze lingering on the SUV. He finally spoke again, his tone heavy with judgment. "It's a nice car. A bit flashy for someone like you, don't you think?" Jess clenched her jaw, but didn't rise to the bait. She had dealt with worse. "Is there anything else?" Reynolds hesitated, his eyes narrowing. Before he could respond, Officer Brian Hill, the younger officer, joined him at the window. Hill, while more polite, still held the same skepticism. "This neighborhood isn't exactly the kind of place people like you usually drive through. What's going on?" The subtle racism in Hill's words was not lost on Jess. She had expected it, but it didn't make it any easier. "I'm just passing through," Jess replied, her voice even. "No need for trouble." But Hill wasn't convinced. He took a step closer, eyes scanning her with an air of suspicion. "I'll need to see some ID," he insisted. Jess handed over her license again, but the implication of his words lingered. They doubted her, simply because of her race and the car she drove. As Jess waited for the officers to process the information, Reynolds' skepticism became more obvious. "You don't look like a woman who drives a fancy car through here," he muttered. "This doesn't add up." Jess took a deep breath. She had been in situations like this before. She was tired of pretending to be smaller than she was, of shrinking herself to fit into a world that had never made space for her. "I'm the chief of police," she said, her voice calm but firm. Reynolds blinked, clearly caught off guard. Hill's expression faltered, but he didn't respond immediately. "Right," Reynolds said finally, his tone dripping with disbelief. "And I'm the mayor. You're just another black woman driving a fancy car." Jess didn't flinch. She had no time for his mockery. "That's where you're wrong. I am the chief of police. I don't answer to you, but right now you're answering to me." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, the officers stood in stunned silence. Reynolds, flustered, stammered, but Jess had already made her point. She put the car in drive, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. As Jess eased the SUV back into motion, Reynolds and Hill were left behind, the authority they assumed they had now stripped away. The quiet authority Jess had just demonstrated left them uncertain, rattled. They hadn't expected to be challenged by someone like her, someone who not only held power but embodied it in a way they couldn't ignore. She didn't care for their discomfort, though. She wasn't here to make them comfortable. She was here to do her job, to show them what real authority looked like. Jess arrived at police headquarters, her mind still sharp from the confrontation. The building was bustling with activity, officers moving from one task to another, exchanging quick words in passing. She could feel their eyes on her as she walked through the halls, some filled with curiosity, others with doubt. But Jess knew this was just the beginning. The meeting with the department heads awaited her, and she had no illusions about the work ahead. The corruption, the ingrained biases, and the systemic problems within the department. Today, she would start to address them. But she also knew it wouldn't happen overnight. As Jess stepped into the elevator, she took a deep breath. The road ahead would be difficult, but she was ready. She had spent her whole life preparing for this moment. Now, it was time to prove that she belonged exactly where she was. In the end, the confrontation on the side of the road wasn't just a test of authority. It was a moment of realization. Jess Carter wasn't just breaking new ground as the first Black female chief of police. She was reshaping the very nature of what power looked like in a city that had underestimated her. Subscribe to our channel for soul-stirring stories.